Hi, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our session, Creating Value for Taxpayers, a different approach to public sector consulting. Very much looking forward to this. So basically today, we've got a talk on saying goodbye to traditional consultants who just cream off the top, and hello to a new era of public sector innovation. So that's quite a challenging title. Anyway, in this talk, Sian Rodway will share MDRx's approach to creating value for taxpayers when it comes to public sector work. Sian will discuss how they choose their projects in this space, how they see it as an opportunity to give back as well. And also Sian's going to delve into their approach to client engagement and delivery. And that includes prioritizing long-term value for clients and making sure, and I think this is an important one, that they have the tools to continue developing their products after this, long after the consultants have gone. So a little bit of housekeeping. Your cameras and microphones are muted. We'll hear Sian's presentation and then we'll take questions at the end, and you can submit your questions into the Q&A tab or into the chat on the bottom of the screen there. So before we get underway, just allow me to introduce our speakers. So Sian Rodway is MDRx's Chief Operating Officer. She leads and shapes the delivery of their consulting services, and she's led the development of innovative strategies in both public and private sector organizations, and has seen the design of new business models that enables clients effectively to adopt new technologies. Her management and delivery has been commended by the UK's National Security Advisor, and she's a qualified performance coach and is a coach to the civil service fast stream. So I think we have the right person giving today's talk. Sian, over to you. Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that introduction. And it is lovely to be here today as part of Digital Leaders Week. As Robin said, it is quite a challenging topic in terms of the conversation. So I want to start by telling you a little bit more about MDRx as a new consultancy, and then we'll go on to talk about how we're doing things a little bit differently. So we're a consultancy who exists to harness emerging technologies in a legally compliant way. We're part of the Mishcon de Rare group, which means alongside our team of strategists, data scientists, software engineers, we have access to world-class lawyers who really give us an edge in terms of being able to build in the legals to projects that we deliver. So, as Robin said, I'm here to talk about how consultancies can create value for taxpayers through a different approach to public sector consulting. And with that title, I think it's important to set out the context that I am in no way anti-consulting in the public sector. Not only do I run a business whose a large proportion of work is in the public sector, but also I've built my own career working on consulting projects in the public sector that have been extremely innovative, certainly very beneficial to my own career. So I do think that consulting has a place in supporting the public sector to deliver services, but I do think that we could be doing it better. So today I'm going to start with thinking about three things that MDRx focuses on when it comes to creating that value. So we're going to talk about how we make decisions on what work we should do, and how we do that in a way that focuses on value creation, how we incentivize our team, and how we prepare to leave projects behind. I think that many of you on the call will be from either consulting or public sector backgrounds, and it probably goes without saying that you've heard tropes around the value that consulting delivers to the public sector. That is a common belief, sadly, and something that we are seeing more and more in the mainstream media in terms of criticisms about whether or not consultants deliver value. And often I think we have anecdotal and personal experience of projects where that's not been the case. I even, in the spirit of it being Digital Leaders Week AI conference yesterday, asked ChatGPT whether or not consultants delivered value in the public sector. And it agreed that this is a very complex and hotly debated topic. So as Robin said, I'm hoping that some of that debate we can have later on. But first of all, to cut through through some of that complexity, let's move on to the first of those three areas. So how does MDRx choose opportunities that are based on creating client value, and what could others learn from this? The first thing that's really important here is understanding your strengths as an organisation. For us, we focus on projects where we know we've got a competitive edge and can deliver value beyond others in the market. For us, it is not about getting as many public sector consulting jobs as possible, but focusing on the ones where we create value. When you do this as an organisation, it's important to make sure that this translates to the team too. We don't have expertise that we sell in an organisational level and then leave behind when it comes to delivering as a team. It's really important that the teams that deliver within the public sector also include some of the experts that you are selling in as an organisation. Sometimes we dress this up in management consulting as reach back or value add. And I disagree that this should be something that should be reached back for or added as something extra. Creating, delivering value through having expertise embedded in the team is really important. Often when we see teams trying to be competitive on price, they will be resourced with more junior members of the consulting business. And although I think this is really valuable in growing future leaders in consulting, making sure that we have blended experience in teams is going to make sure that that value is added. Similarly, sometimes management consultancies are guilty of saying that the value that they add is knowledge of the department or organisation. I don't deny that working for a department for a long time and gaining organisational knowledge is valuable on consulting assignments, but that is not value that we are adding and delivering to the taxpayer. The value that we add and deliver as consultants is what we bring in addition to experience and expertise that is already within the team in the department. So I guess to sum up this first area on choosing opportunities that create value, I want us to make sure that as consultancies, we are focusing on opportunities where we add additional value to what the client has in-house, that we make sure that our teams are blended. And then when we consider opportunities, we think about the impact that we are going to have. I'm going to move on to a second area, which is incentivization. So how does incentivization link to creating value for the taxpayer? We could talk about here incentivization in terms of commercial incentives, contractual incentives. As a consulting leader, those sorts of incentives are out of my control. Maybe something interesting to pick up in the Q&A in terms of how those procurement processes work and how they could be shaped to look more like some of the commercial mechanisms more prevalent in the private sector to make sure that organisations get the most out of consultancies. But I'm going to talk about how I incentivize our MDRx team in order to make sure that we focus on delivering value rather than individual incentives that aren't necessarily linked to that goal. So just to level up, there might be some people on the call who don't know how the consulting industry works in general. So we tend to grow consultants and they build their expertise, the sort of people we want on projects that we have just been talking about over years, and we promote them within the organisation. They have greater responsibility on projects and they're really starting to get to a position where they add value to the clients.
Sian,
and then
sorry,
usually at some...
Sian, sorry. I'm not seeing your slides move. Are they moving for you?
No, that's fine. It's just one slide. I'm
perfect.
I should have said deciding not to use them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. So in terms of incentives and how they generally work within organisations, consulting organisations, people progress through the business, becoming more and more expert in the thing that they are consulting on, and then eventually they get promoted into a sales role. Now that sales role incentivises individuals to grow teams, so perhaps to sell more people into current projects, or to extend those projects in order to deliver on their performance indicators, which are around the amount of revenue that they are generating for the consulting business. The challenge with this is that it is not aligned always to delivering value for the client and in turn the taxpayer. How we've addressed this at MDRx is we have broken that usual model of how we incentivize our consultants. At all levels of our delivery organization, we measure the success of our consultants based on the impact that they deliver to clients, not on sales. It means that if we cast our minds back to bringing expertise into the organization, we have people at all levels who are motivated to join and participate in those project teams, and they continue to be. We have got a separate growth function, which operates really successfully. And we have had consultants that want to join growth and focus on sales, which is absolutely fine. But we have a different set of incentivizations for that team versus the people who are delivering on client projects. I talked about this from the perspective of leaders in consulting organizations, but this is something that is prevalent at all levels, with a focus on utilization for more junior consultants too. Most often, consultants, the largest contributor to how a junior consultant's performance is measured is the number of hours or days they've spent on a consulting project in a year, not the amount of value that they have delivered in that year to clients. I think that has to change. We are removing, or we have never had a utilization target on an individual basis. Obviously, it's important for the business and our commercial performance, but in terms of individuals at all levels of the organization, we focus on the impact that they have on projects, not on how many days or hours they have booked. So I think that that covers incentivization, and I hope that you'll agree that if we measured consultants by value delivered to the taxpayer when it comes to the public sector, then actually we'd have a much healthier relationship with our clients, and our goals would be much better aligned. So the final area I want to talk about as something that MDRx does to make sure that we are delivering value to the taxpayer is leave projects. Now, it might sound, again, a bit strange that as a leader of a consulting firm, I am keen for our projects to end. But I think it's a really important factor that plays into how much value you deliver for a client. We should be thinking about leaving projects at the earliest point we can. That doesn't mean that I think all consulting projects need to be really short, although recent data show there is more of a trend in the private sector towards that, which I think is healthy. But it does mean that we are identifying exit plans from the beginning. We think it's really important to build the capability in-house so that our clients can take forward the results we've built. All know that this is a time-boxed project, and actually beyond the project, the organisation will move on to focus on other things. Both are fine, but both rely on having an exit plan from the beginning. Again, it really relies on the incentivization structures being in the right place so that your team are coaching the client towards wanting to end the relationship. And it also relies on what I said up front in terms of the expertise in the team being able to build up the capability within the public sector. Sometimes I think as consultants, we go in and we work on the most interesting and challenging problems. I think that if we changed our mindset, so we were focusing on enabling clients to solve those problems and really got praise when others were enabled to solve those problems on their own in the future, we would see better value for taxpayers. So in terms of how we make sure we have an exit plan, there's a couple of things that are particularly important here. So making sure that there is some strategic planning around what the future business model is going to look like. Is there a role for external consultants? Perhaps there's a skill set that really isn't going to be something that the public sector wants to invest in long term, and there might be a sensible business case for keeping that as something that is contracted externally for or outsourced. Knowing what that business model needs to look like in the future allows you to support your clients with recruitment. We're currently working with a couple of clients on their recruitment processes. I think that it's important to acknowledge that as consulting leaders, we recruit the sorts of experts that our businesses are looking for all of the time. So we should be able to advise on how to find the best candidates and help them recruit them. And then thirdly, I want to talk about knowledge sharing. I think that knowledge sharing is something that should be considered when suppliers are being assessed for how much value that they can add to a role. I think it's a really useful litmus test to say, is this an area of specialism for a consultancy business? If it is, they are likely to have some sort of in-house development to grow and develop their own experts in a particular area. If they don't, then it might say something about the depth of their own expertise or how much they do invest in it. So I think that we should consider really carefully during procurement process, not only whether whether a consultancy has access to a data innovation development program or a product development program, but also whether you can access it. We provide that knowledge sharing from day one. We're happy for clients to join and engage in our own communities of practice and development programs where they are in-house, because it allows them to get better results in the long term. And as I said, because we've got our incentivization set up right, and we're working on projects where we know we can deliver unique value, this is something that really benefits our clients and something that is at no cost to us. So I guess to bring those three things together and sum up before we move into the Q&A, whether you are a consulting leader, or working in the public sector with consultants, I think that I hope I provided three areas that you can consider going forward to improve the value that you get from working with consultants, and to make sure that you are challenging the status quo of working with suppliers that do not add expertise beyond the knowledge of your organization, who incentivize their people to deliver value for you and for the taxpayer, and finally are happy to leave when they have delivered an impact. The really interesting thing there is I think we are seeing better results by delivering impact and clients wanting to work with us more often on future projects, rather than trying to sort of put down roots and stay on the same projects for long periods of time. So I hope, if nothing else, that is an incentive for you all to do something differently too.
Great, well done, Sian. Apologies for my interruption.
No worries at all. My fault, I should have said at the start.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. So no, really interesting approach that you're taking. So do put your questions into the Q&A for Sian if you'd like to ask her to elaborate, and I will ask those. So here's the first one. Thank you for an engaging and useful talk. My question is, how do you measure the impact made by your team members, including on client capability gained, and how does that translate into pay and other staff benefits? Great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. So obviously the impact that is delivered on a project is project specific, but we make sure that that is defined up front. And sadly, I think that that's something that is regularly missed. But it can be quite simply defined by asking the question, what is the difference that your organization will have seen when this consulting project ends? And that might be a big outcome or benefit over a longer term project, or it might be a specific output that is put into the hands of the client and that they can use going forward. So we look at what we can measure in terms of impact, and then we also assess the quality of that impact. So we would look at feedback from the client and feedback internally on the quality of what has been delivered. taking into account the second part of your question, which is around, well, how does that translate into pay and other staff benefits? So I think that you would find that our reward model is not dissimilar to sort of best practice. We have competency matrices that we expect people to move through. One thing that we do differently is we review reward quarterly. So that allows us to make sure that when people are delivering impact, they are rewarded for that. Okay, not quite in real time, but very quickly after that happens. What my reflections are on sort of an annual reward process is that you can't have such a incentive for impact, because it takes such a long time for an individual to see the results of that. More generally, we reward people through pay and progression, both within their roles and then obviously at promotions the same on a quarterly basis, and we also have an EMI scheme amongst other benefits that really allow people to buy into the goals of the organisation. But yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Kate.
So next question here is actually what I'd like to ask myself as well. You talk about criteria you use when choosing projects in the public sector, and therefore sort of how does that create value for the taxpayer? But that almost feels the wrong way around. So is there so much? So I'm not a consultant, so I'm asking really as a non-consultant. Is there so much work out there that you can sort of pick and choose what you go for? And obviously, if you go for something, you're not necessarily going to win it. So because obviously other people are pitching for it. So I mean, is there a huge amount of work out there for consultants?
Yeah.
So you get to pick. Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
No, thank you, Robin. Absolutely, the public sector in the UK is the biggest market for consultancies. I think there was £1 billion spent on consulting in 2019-20. So yes, there is a huge amount out there. Personally, and I would say this coming from an emerging consultancy, I think there needs to be more diversity in the consultancies who are used for public sector work. And I think that seeing partnerships and seeing consultancies having to work in blended teams is often a really good way to keep consultants on their toes.
And then what are your criteria for choosing?
So first of all, we look at whether or not we've got that technical expertise, right? So is there something that we have on when it comes to an emerging technology that we can add value on? In other situations, we recently did a large project with the National Archives, which was about providing access to legal data. Now, obviously, as part of the Mishcon de Reya group, we have really deep expertise in that field and how to improve access to judgments and in turn improve access to justice for the taxpayer. So we first would look at that technical expertise, and then we would look at whether or not the field that the work is in, we have something to add and some knowledge to add beyond what would already exist within that team. Often that includes whether or not we have private and public sector experience, actually, making sure that we're bringing the best from outside and as I said, adding to the knowledge that is already going to be within an organisation like the National Archives. Obviously, then to build on that, we are looking at whether we can resource that team with experts and the commercial side of it. I think sometimes these factors make it sound like, you know, we're doing this all for the greater good. We have to operate as a successful business, but I think that you can operate as a successful business whilst providing value through your technical expertise, your sector expertise, and making sure that you are best placed to deliver that work. I would say a slightly unsaid factor as well is not to be greedy. Don't bid for everything that is available because you can broadly hit the criteria that the client is asking for, really focus your resources on what you can do to make a difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my next question is about the public sector side. So you're sort of saying we bring value, MDRx brings value that kind of in addition to what's been asked for. So, are there changes that the public sector can make in what they're asking for so that all consultancies have to bring the additional value that you bring?
Yeah, I would say so. And like I said, I think that where I chose to focus this is on the levers that I have control over within MDRx and what we've done. But I certainly think that there are changes that the public sector could make too. And procurement is obviously the best place to start. I think efficiency and flexibility in the procurement process to enable the departments to access the organisations that have the right expertise is absolutely key, just getting organisations through the door. But I also think that there needs to be a preparedness to recruit and retain experts in the way that consultancies do. Related to Kate's question in terms of the sort of incentives and pay and benefits in a consultancy, I think that we need to make roles in the public sector more attractive, so that when capabilities are brought in-house, the civil service is able to recruit people who can deliver on those capabilities. There are lots of fantastic people within the civil service. As you mentioned, I've done coaching on the fast stream, and it's a hugely competitive grad scheme, but retaining those people and giving them the difficult problems to work on rather than giving them all to consultants, I think is a really good place to start. Yeah,
I agree with that. And then what are you doing? You've talked about long-term value for your clients in the public sector. So how would you stay engaged and involved in terms of, so obviously, there is this issue that consultants come in, they bring in expertise, and then they sort of throw it over the wall to the normal team who go, wow, we don't have the long-term capability to develop and keep this going. So how do you go about that? Do you stay involved over a long period of time? Do you stay in touch? What's the approach?
Yeah, so we definitely would stay in touch, and I think that having a dependency from the start of the project, that there is a client team who are engaged and own the project. And I think sometimes it's quite a difficult thing as a consultant that you don't own what you are delivering. Right. So sometimes as sort of a team of highly ambitious and really dedicated consultants, you can be tempted to feel like you want to own this thing that you're delivering and you're really, really proud of it. But making sure that we have the mindset going into projects that we are there to enable others, and the success in our role is the longevity of the project. I think that there is, as I said, coming down to some of the same points here, but making sure that you know at the start what value is going to look like in the long term. And I think as well, making sure that sometimes that is stopping the project. We've done this discovery piece of work. We do not think that there is a viable option here that is going to deliver value for the taxpayer. Let's stop. That is still success, and something that I am seeing happening more often, but probably not enough. So I think that is important when it comes to how projects continue. And then, of course, going back to just making sure that in-house capability is there. I mean, we build great relationships with our clients. And like I said, the value for us is being able to work on the more innovative projects that they're then starting the next month. So maintaining that relationship is key, continuing to give them access to mentoring or development opportunities. As I said, that doesn't come at a cost to a consultancy who is developing those skills for their own business as well, or it comes at a very low cost. So I think it's something we should be continuing to offer to our clients.
Yeah. You touched on procurement, and that's such a big topic, isn't it? So probably won't have a huge opportunity to go into it in detail, but where are you kind of on your views on public sector procurement? I mean, how joined up is it? Are the people who are procuring you involved enough in the client project and the client desire for outcomes? Is it still kept fairly separate within a client organization? You know, is the public sector learning about kind of involving everybody through that process so they get the buy-in, they get the ownership?
Yeah, I think sadly, it's often an area that is really under-resourced in the public sector, so it's hard to hold those who I think are, you know, doing their best to account for something when there is just too much procurement that needs to be done for the teams that exist. I think where those teams are working well, there is reasonably good join up in my experience between the procurement team and the client or the buyer, but the lack of flexibility in the process, the procurement process, means that consultancies can be marked against criteria that actually aren't that relevant to the project that they are delivering, or in some cases, and certainly frustrating as someone who runs a consultancy, they are delivered as a competitive process, but actually it's often a foregone conclusion in terms of the preferred supplier. If that's the case, I would much rather be bidding on work and putting effort into creating proposals where there is an opportunity for suppliers to compete. So I think things like that could definitely be changed to improve competition and therefore the value that the public sector gets. Oh, I think you're on mute, Robin.
Oh gosh, my bad. Apologies. I was saying, I think we're kind of running out of time. If you do have another question, do pop it in the bottom. I'll just give you a moment to put something in there, but that's been a great presentation, Sian. Is there anything sort of you want to add before we finish that
yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you saw on the slide there a QR code. Go and visit our website, MDRx.tech. You can get in contact with me, Sian.Rodway, at MDRx.tech. I'd be really keen to continue this conversation, especially for those who are going to be watching this back later. If you have got any questions or want to work with us to hear about how you could be doing things differently, then please do reach out.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Sian, thanks so much for a great presentation. And yes, people do get in touch with Sian and find out more. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thank you.